So this year I ended up planting chestnut trees from seed. I ended up with 83 chestnut trees. You can see all these chestnut trees that I have here in these pots. I have several pots right here. I have several pots back here behind me. And I ended up selling a few of those trees, and I'm down to 55 chestnut trees, and that's what I'm going to plant this year. But before I plant these trees, I want to check the ones that I've planted before. I've done this before 2 years ago, and I planted several chestnut trees on the east side of the property. And last year when I checked them, I still had 26 chestnut trees out of the about 37 that I had planted. And this year I want to go back and look at those 26 chestnut trees and see how they're doing. I have them in the grow tubes. They're like a tree tube that helps the tree grow up faster. They're a 5-foot tree tube, and it'll basically force the tree to grow up straight and tall and then be able to branch out once it gets out of the tube. So it'll make it grow taller faster. And I know I already have at least 3 trees that are up and out of the 5-foot tube. So I know I have at least 3 trees that are over 5 feet tall in just the first 2 years of being planted. So let's go check those trees today. We'll see how they're doing, see if there's any that have died and need to be replaced with these trees. So this is one of the places that I ended up planting our chestnut trees. It's kind of on a hillside here, and it's pretty much full sun except for the first few hours of the morning. There is trees on the east side that shaded a little bit in the morning time, but this is the place that I've had probably the best luck with the chestnut trees. You can see I've got trees right in here. I've got a tree back in here that are already out of the tree tube, so they're already 5 feet tall. There's 14 chestnut trees in this location, and we'll go ahead and look at these and see how they're doing. So you can see that I've got 3 trees that are out of the tubes. This one here, that one there, and there's one right over there. And you can see that's a 5-foot tall tree tube. Basically comes to about my shoulder. And this thing's at least 6 foot tall already. And it's looking pretty good. So one thing about these tree tubes is they have a removable zip tie. So you can take the zip tie loose. You can take the tree tube off, swap it around. You can and check out your tree or whatever you need to do. So if you do have a tree that ends up dying on you, you know you can get the tree tube back off fairly easily. So let's see what this tree looks like. So there you go. That is a 2-year-old chestnut tree. It's only 2 years old. Now the stem on this, about right where I'm holding it right here, the stem on this is only about the size of a pencil. It's not very big. Now if I let go of this, it's going to fall over. See that? So that's one of the bad effects of a tree tube, is that tree tube is going to force it to grow up quicker, but since it's only 2 years old, it doesn't have a big stem yet. So that tree tube's also going to help hold this thing upright. So the idea is we're going to leave these tree tubes on there for at least 7 years. So they're supposed to be UV resistant for 7 years. And after 7 years, this tree ought to be able to hold itself up well enough. So we're going to leave them on there for at least 7 years. Sometime after that, we'll just cut them off of the tree. But there is still a few leaves down here at the bottom. But the tree tube has basically kind of forced the growth to go up, and a lot of these tree leaves from last year didn't try to grow back. So you end up with a pretty, at least on this one, you end up with a pretty bare tree except for the top. We open some of these other ones, it'll have leaves all the way up and down. But this is a pretty good example of how thin this stem can actually be. And but the idea, you know, for the tree tube, the idea of the tree tube is to protect the tree and get it to get higher away from any animals that might want to you know, nibble on this, because deer will browse, they will eat it, you know, they will bite it off and kind of keep it from growing if you don't have these. So I had one that wasn't in a tree tube. I only have 25 tree tubes that first year I planted them, and that one got bit off several times, and I had a decent trunk on it, It was probably at the base, at the ground, probably almost 3/4 inch diameter, but it was only probably 2 feet tall. Just wasn't very tall. And it turned more into a bush than a tree, just because of the way the deer had been, you know, browsing on it. So I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna put this back in the tree tube. This isn't the easiest thing, especially when they're got multiple branches. So put this back in the tree tube, and then we'll open some more up. I'll probably end up only opening up some of these bigger ones. I'll probably just open up one more that's really big, because I really don't want to damage the tree while we're doing this. As we go around, I'll show you examples, but I think the majority of these we're just going to look down the tube and see if we still have a tree and see how it's doing. So there it is, back in the tube. Let's go check out some more trees. So this tree here is probably my tallest tree. It's probably actually close to 7 feet tall. So you got 5 feet here, there's about 6, and there's about 7. So it's about 7 feet tall in 2 years. So this is probably my best chestnut tree. And unlike that chestnut, the first chestnut tree we looked at, there's actually, you can see green leaves all the way down. So that's probably the trunk of this tree is not as bare as that one was. It probably has leaves. It looks like it has leaves going all the way down. So I'm definitely not going to take this one out of the tube, because the more leaves on there, the harder it is to get back in the tube. So I'm going to go around, see if we can find any dead trees, and just see kind of what the average, because these are our best performers, right? So let's go see kind of what the average tree size is in this location. So this tree here, it's actually probably a good representation about what's average in this location. So it's actually somewhere around halfway up the tube. And so most of the trees in this location are about 2 to 4 feet tall. And so this is probably the average height right here. So that's probably close to 3 feet tall right here, this tree. And so at least these smaller trees, they're normally a lot easier to get back inside of the tube. So I've gone through here, I've looked at all these trees, and that tree right there, that is the only one that's actually dead. You can tell that it actually probably only got to close to a foot tall. It was a very short tree. And then there is one more tree over here on this side, actually kind of in full sun, that's a foot tall too. That's our shortest tree in here. There's one over here that's only about 12 to 14 inches tall, and the rest of these trees are either 2 feet tall up to 7 feet tall. So I think for these trees only being 2 years old, you know, since they were grown from seed, they're only 2 years old this year. I think this area is doing pretty good. That is our first tree to die in this area in 2 years, and I'll just replace that when I plant the rest of my trees this year. So let's go check out the other locations I planted trees. So in this location right here, this is a pretty shady spot. Actually, only right here in the middle of the day does this really only get sun. It has trees to the east, west, north, and south. So there's only really about 20 feet wide this way and about 40 feet wide that way where there's no trees, and we've planted that here in the middle. And we did have a couple other trees kind of over here. We originally planted 5 trees in this location, and we lost 2 the first year. Now this tree right here, that one is probably not even at 12 inches tall, only has a few leaves, so it looks like this tree is probably going to end up dying this year. We'll have to wait and see. That next tree, it's only a foot tall, just at a foot tall. But that last tree in the row, the one that's closest to the trees, the one you'd think would be the worst, because it's actually closer to this big tulip tree right here. that one's actually 3 feet tall. So this is a very shaded area. It's a pretty level ground clay soil here, and needless to say, it looks like I'll probably only have really one good tree out of the 5 I planted here 2 years ago in this location. So definitely you can tell that the level ground and the shade is not doing well for these trees. So in this location, it is also partially shaded, but it's not as shaded as the last location. So this gets a little bit more sun. It's not full sun. We originally planted 4 trees in this location, 2 there, and we had 2 over here. So we did lose one of those last year, and this one right here is struggling. It's only about a foot tall. It's not doing very well. Now the other 2 trees are doing okay. That one's probably 2 feet tall. That one's probably 2.5 feet tall. But I think that kind of shows again that that partially shaded location, level clay soil, it's really not ideal for planting chestnut trees. So far we've looked at 20 of our chestnut trees that we planted, and we've only had one that's actually dead. We do have a few that are struggling. And so here's where I had the 6 remaining chestnut trees of the 26 that I had alive last year. I had 5 of those in tubes. I had one that wasn't in a tube because I didn't have a tube to put over it. So this location, you can see this is to the east here, and it doesn't get morning sun because of these trees right here. But this whole side over here is all open, so it gets sun. Most of the day it just doesn't get morning sun. Most of these trees are actually doing fairly good in this location, so let's go have a look. Oh. So when you walk up to one of these chestnut trees in the tubes, a lot of times you can see the green leaf matter in the tube, and the very upper leaf is somewhere in here, which is somewhere around my stomach. So this is about a 3 foot tall tree right there. It's doing fairly well. That tree right there, it seems to be doing good. I can see leaves on it. I don't know if you can see all the leaves in this tube as it grows up. So it is about there. So it's about a 4 foot tall tree. Now right here, this is where the tree was that wasn't in a tube. And it was more bushy. It wasn't growing up, it was more bushy. But the problem is I came through here and I mowed a couple weeks ago. And when I swung the mower around, I ended up on the tractor, the brush hog cut this tree off. So I lost this tree. Out of the 37 trees I planted that first year, I think this brings me up to about 3 or 4 that I actually ended up hitting with the mower and killed. So if you take those out of the equation, I've actually done pretty good on most of my chestnut trees. So here's what's left of the tree that I mowed over. You can see that this trunk's actually a decent size. It's probably actually close to the size of my thumb in diameter. It's too bad that we actually had a pretty healthy tree there. It wasn't tall, but it was alive and healthy. Too bad I cut that one off. Well, it's probably been a week. I think it's been a week now since I mowed that tree over. I'm kind of keeping my eye on it. I kind of hope that maybe it will come back from the roots and grow again, since it did have such a healthy little branch on there, but I kind of doubt it. I think that one's a goner. But so here's another tree tube. This one right here is, this is closest to this tree line here, so it gets the most amount of shade, and it is actually right at a foot tall. So let me show you what a tree that's not doing very well looks like. Let's have a look at this one. So this tree isn't very big. You can see it's a pretty short tree. Put my hand next to it. It's probably only about 9 inches tall. Now the problem, what I think happened here is I think this was one of my original trees that was not in a tree tube, and it got ate by the deer. You can see as you kind of get closer, the original stem ends right here, and it was actually bit off by a deer at one point in time, and it's been struggling ever since. When I had a tree die, I actually put a tube on this tree. So it didn't have a tube originally. It has it had a tube put on it last year, but it's obviously struggling and not doing very well in this location. Well, I ended up finding another dead tree. This tree right here, I thought actually was alive. You could see some leaf matter in there, and I thought maybe it was alive, but all the leaves that are in there are brown. And that tree is actually like 3 feet tall. So typically, when I got a tree that's like 3 feet tall, it seems to be more healthy if it's got that far in life. Most of the ones that I find dead normally don't make it much over a foot tall. So this is probably the tallest one I've had die on me. So let's go ahead and take the tube off and look at this tree. So I'm not really sure what caused this chestnut tree to die, but it had a lot of leaves on it at one point in time. So it was probably a pretty healthy tree at one point in time. I don't know if it just didn't come back awake after the winter and these are the fall leaves, or if it actually, grew this spring, grew all these leaves and then died. I got a feeling that it just didn't come back alive this spring, but that's just one more tree that I need to replace. So that brings me to a total of 3 trees out of the 26 from 2 years ago that I need to replace. And I'll just plant those along with the rest of them when I get to all those planting. So the last tree in this area is probably the best one in this area. It is actually like right here. So it is almost out of the tube. There's a little bit of grass coming out of the tube. But so it looks like probably, by the end of the summer, this one will be up and out of the tube. That's a good looking tree right there. So overall, I think I'm pretty happy. One tree died because of me and the mower. And then I have 2 that are dead just from natural causes. And I've got at least probably 2 or 3 trees that are kind of struggling. But overall, I think I'm pretty happy with the chestnuts and how they're doing. So I do have 55 more trees that I'm going to plant. And a bunch of these are actually going to plant kind of in this location. So I've kind of mowed this whole area down. So from these trees here, I'm going to kind of keep continuing on this way. And then I'm going to kind of fill in this whole area back that way with chestnut trees. And if I need to, I may mow down some of this grass over here, put chestnut trees in this location also. But this is where the majority of my chestnut trees will go. And then that'll kind of help fill out the basically the east side of my driveway. I want to try to get it all filled back in with trees, and hopefully it'll be good for deer. I'll be able to hunt over it. It could also be, maybe I could call it a chestnut orchard later on in life, 10 years down the road, and it might end up being some type of an income source later on with that many chestnut trees. Because my goal is to finally end up having over 100 chestnut trees on this side. With the ones I plant this year, that'll bring me up to about 75. And so then I still plan on planting more the year after that until I definitely get up over 100. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Soon I'll be getting the rest of these chestnuts that I grew this year, and we'll be planting them all through this area. And then it'll be all these white tubes all down this side. So it'll kind of look a little weird, but eventually it'll be a nice chestnut forest when I'm done. Thanks for watching.